Yeah, awesome. All right. Okay. All right. I'm just supposed to get started. Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlotte. I work for a community dispensing software company, DispenseWorks, and I am a community pharmacist by trade as well. So today, apologies. Today I will be hosting the medication dispense information session. I do have a slide deck to go through, so we'll just see where we get up to today in this session, and then if we need to reschedule or do any more further sessions, then we will definitely give those ones a crack. All right. So just to start off with, we do have the general Menti that we usually go through. I've just got the QR code and I've got the Menti code as well on screen. If everyone can go through and just grab the QR code, I'll keep it up for a couple minutes, and then if you're happy, Michael, would you be happy taking over on the Menti?
Yep, I'll jump into. I'll take the share so I can get
That's
the
okay.
Menti out. So hopefully you can see the Menti. So you can just go to menti.com and enter that number or scan the QR code. It'd be good if everyone on the call can do it so we get a good cross section of this. And I'll jump to the first one.
Oh, just so you're aware, the Menti code on the PowerPoint is different to the one that's up there. Is that okay?
Oh, no, it must have just rolled. We have this problem. I think they last for 2 weeks and then they roll. So maybe we created it on a Friday and it just rolled. So the Menti code's on the screen there. That's the one you need.
Fab.
Getting some people to enter, so that's good.
Awesome. And just with this question here as well, just as a information or a reminder that you can select multiple answers too. So if you do wear multiple hats, then you can definitely provide those as answers. We've got a really good mix of people.
Yeah, it's always good when we get a nice mix.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Should
Shall I
we
jump
go?
to the next one? Yeah.
All right. So has everyone attended or participated in, I suppose, in the HL7 working group calls? Again, you can pop in multiple responses as well to this one.
Oh, we've got at least one new person. That's great. A few new. If this is your first call, this is just an information session today, so we're not making any decisions. There are no dumb questions, so if you've got a question about anything, don't be afraid to speak up. It's all opinions and thoughts are welcome in this forum.
Yes. Alrighty. I think we can move
That's
on to
great.
the next one. All right. And how well does everyone know AU Core? Oh, we've got at least one fire starter as well.
All right. Found a good mix of people. Jump to the next one.
Yeah. Awesome. And how well does everyone know the Fire Medication Dispense resource? So there is a resource currently in AU base.
I think Danielle came up with those
That is awesome.
resources.
I love that one. I love all those options.
That's good. No one's overdosed on it.
Maybe the one. Yeah, the new Menti code works, Philip. Sorry, I didn't see the message before. Awesome. Do you want to wait for another moment, or do you reckon we just move on
I
with
think
this?
we can move on. I think this is the last question in this set.
Awesome. And if anyone's got any use cases for medication dispense information, then please pop this one through. Awesome. Absolutely. With clinical decision support. I hope that's our main use case.
Sorry, there is a limit on this one. So I think it's only 25 characters for a word cloud. So might be cutting off some people. So you got to be concise.
Um, we've got some good ones coming through, anyways, with the clinical decision support and dispensing integrations, absolutely, patient education, e-health record, quality indicators, patient medication history, I believe is PMH, and then reconciliation with requests, so reconciliation with a pharmacist there. So we'll give it another minute or two if that's okay, and then I'm happy to jump on with the presentation.
Yep, you can just take the screen back whenever you're ready.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, home care support, I like that one as well. So we have some good use cases for medication dispense. So I hope that we will have a good discussion with today's session. All right. What I'll do is I'm just going to share again. Yeah. Replace current share. Awesome. Can everyone see me now?
Yep, let's come up.
Okay, so just with today's mentee. So just in this session, what I hope to cover in the medication dispense is we need a scope and purpose. Why are we building this, and why are we going through and popping AU core into medication dispense into the AU core? I want to go through the must support elements that we believe that we should have in, and just have a discussion if there is any further must support elements that people would like to investigate and review. I've got in here our must support obligations, but they will be stock standard to what we've currently got as a must support for AU core, value set bindings, and then some of our search parameters in here as well. So in our AU core medication dispense, what do we need to do? So essentially, we do have a profile that is already an AU base, and we need to derive from its profile what is the absolute must that we need to bring over for AU core. I do have a list of the must support elements to be discussed, so I won't cover that on this slide. Our obligations are, so if it is populate if known, and if not, then we won't. Look at potentially our value set bindings that we do have, our set and our search parameters as well. So I have provided a list of search parameters that I believe that we may need to cover. I'm happy to have a further discussion at this slide as well. We've got the why we're covering this. So standard FHIR representation that allows authorized parties to access and share standard set of information for the medication dispense profile. So this is currently happening with our medication request profile, and that's been pulled through to AU core. So we believe that dispense should, I suppose, match it. So the impact that this will have is we need a new profile in the R3 release for AU core. And why now is dispensing information fuels that medicine reconciliation. We support adherence monitoring, and we can enable that analytics and providing that information there too. So just to start off with our scope and purpose, what I've got in here at the moment is the purpose of AU core medication dispense is defined as the minimum requirements for viewing the dispensing record, providing a viewing that dispensing record. Dispensing indicates that the medication product is to be or has been dispensed for a name and person. So I've excluded from here purchase order supply and supply of medication that is not to a patient. This includes a description of the medication product, supply provided, and the instructions for administrating the medication. The medication dispense can be a result of the pharmacy system responding to a medication order. These examples can include the collection of an outpatient or community pharmacy or dispensing to a patient-specific medication from an inpatient pharmacy ward. So the purpose and scope is the providing of this medication to a patient. I've excluded any providing of a medication to a ward, impress stock, or through non-patient means for the purpose of our discussion. Is everyone happy with that? I'm happy to take silence as well. The only thing is, I don't think, let me just have a look here. Apologies, I didn't have the messages. If anyone's got any messages as well, I can have a bit of a look and see. And Michael, if you're happy to help me monitor the chat as well.
Yep, I'll keep an eye on the chat. But we had a couple of thumbs up, and silence generally means people are happy.
Yeah, I'm happy with silence. All right, so let me move on to the next one. So I've just popped this slide in just so everyone is aware, this is just, it's the same as what you've gone through with the other information sessions, is to just understand the must support obligations. It's the stock standard must support obligations for AU core. I'm completely copy and pasted from the HL7 website just to say that they're going to be the exact same, and we don't see any reason for that to change. So jumping into the AU core medication dispense must support elements, we have put on the Confluence page the must support elements, and we have done a comparison through to the US core, which was the only other international FHIR reference set as well, just to align or see what we have aligned with them too. Apologies, I'm just bringing this through on my screen here. So on the Confluence page, we've had up to see what everyone is using, and if there is any changes or if there's anything that anyone would want to recommend as a must support, we do have some discussion points as well, which I'll do my best to go through during the presentation as well. So the first element that I wanted to have a discussion on was the identifier element. So in AU base, this is identifier or the local dispense identifier. I had put a discussion point in here over whether or not we should consider the identifier as a must support element, as this is for local systems what identifies that unique dispense, as dispenses can happen multiple times for prescriptions or can be reissued multiple dispensers. This provides just that single, this was the line that was dispensed at that point in time. Sorry, I'd seen a message come through and I just needed to.
Sorry, that was me. I just put a link into the Confluence page that you set up. So
Thank you. Does anyone have, or does anyone want to consider this as a must support element? I'm happy to have a look into it. We've left it out by now as it's not mandatory for that viewing of a medication item.
So just to clarify for anyone that might be new here, so the must supports are an obligation, which Charlotte showed on the sort of slide before. But in AU Core, our must supports tend to be for a populate if known. So in this case here, we're identify cardinality 0 if you have one and no one, and we put a must support on it. You need to provide it. But if you don't have one or don't know one, you don't provide it. So that's the obligation we're looking at here, and the obligation on the receiver is just to not error, to know that you're likely to get one, but you need to not error. It's pretty low obligation on that point. So it's not a particularly high bar, but it's whether it's important. Like, is this something that's important that we want people to provide or not? Does anyone think we should have a must support? Philip?
Maybe I was thinking of the wrong question here. My first view of requiring a must support of a codable concept for a medication dispense scares me because of the items that not everything's on the AMT, not everything's on the PBS. In hospital, we have S100s and foreign drugs, et cetera, that may be allowed to be given or just labeled that would come through as a dispensing piece, even if they weren't paid for. So that's where my head kind of goes of like, I would, in an ideal world, yes, I want almost everything codable, but I feel like I can't yet say that everything actually is codable to something like the AMT or PBS in reality. I'm not sure that's the question you were asking though, Michael. So I may have totally taken us down a rabbit.
I think that depends on the strength of the obligation, right? So I think our obligations in AU Core are populate if known. So in that case where you don't know, you
Okay.
don't need to populate it.
Yeah,
So obviously we could have stronger obligations than that, but we don't. In AU Core, especially when it's still an optional element, it's a populate if known. So if you don't know it, you don't have to provide it. But if we're leaning towards, you know what, if you've got one, we really want it, that would be the indication to have a must support.
That I'm kind of okay with.
Just also, Michael, I don't know whether Phil's talking about a medication identifier as opposed to what I think you're talking about here. Isn't that the identifier for the dispense?
Yeah, it's the identifier for the dispensing record.
Yeah, good point.
So the identifier, as opposed to the first identifier, is the identifier. So this could be the dispensing ID, the prescription ID, that local systems keep in order to track the singular record. Does anyone see they would require a must support on this element?
So just to confirm, you're talking about the first row here, essentially.
Yeah, just the first row.
The identifiers on the coding side of things.
Yes, just on the first row. So just the identifier and the coding.
I would propose that every system should have some way that they're internally knowing their dispense action that they could expose so that other systems would know to request more details about it from that. So I would be okay thinking it should be a must support, and I don't know that the cardinality should be 0. I would think that it would be 1 to many, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it should be an expectation that we should have an identifier in every single dispense that we have locally. So that should be something that should be considered. But I'd be happy to change that and consider this as a must support item with you, Philip.
Charlotte, was there a reason why you hadn't originally thought it might be must support?
It was more of a discussion point. I wanted to make sure that everything I was recommending as a must support item was essentially what we would like to support. So I'd had it as a discussion point over just popping the must support in.
Mhm.
Brett? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say it's I guess it's less of a clinical kind of need in terms of knowing what was dispensed and knowledge about medicines as being more of a tracking admin kind of tool. Yeah, so I would kind of go. I don't think it's as important as the other ones more than anything. So it's yeah, but I people want it. That's great.
So did you still have your hand up from before or
No, a new
within?
question.
Ah,
Yeah,
awesome. Sorry.
just making sure here that if you have a multi-ingredient or an extemporaneous medication or something like that, that um, where you might have one dispense ID or one identifier for that dispense, but you then had lots of other, ingredients that we might need to expose to other things, that wouldn't cause an issue with making a must support or switching to cardinality, just making sure that case was covered.
I think in the purpose for the identifier, because that would be multiple medications on the single script, on the single dispense, or are you talking about multiple dispensers so you
Um,
dispense everything individually?
I'm thinking of, you have well, I mean, my first use case, because I'm in the hospital space, of course, is like TPNs and oncology and all that kind of stuff. So you have a single dispense, but then you maybe had two or three products that came together to make that single dispense or, an extemporaneous item like a cream.
Yeah.
So I have a single dispense, but behind the scenes, I had multiple different medication products that made up that single dispense and just making sure that is still okay if we enforce an identifier at this level, that we're not somehow causing issues downstream based on how I'd have to model those separate products that made up that single dispense.
Yeah, I don't believe it would have an impact at this level because it is just on that total dispense. Wouldn't that be listed in the medication section for the dispense record itself?
But I just don't know this one well enough
Yeah.
to make sure that it's already covered. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, 100%. I believe that would be considered in the medication section. It should be stepped out that these are the items that went into that single dispense. I do have a recommendation for the extemporaneous compound at the end as well, just as a consideration for an extension. Would I be able to revisit it there? Also, Philip?
Sure. Happy for you to table that. Yep.
Thank you. Anthony?
I'm just wondering if in scope is only completed dispensers. So I'm just thinking about the scenario where you want to supply some information before the dispenser's completed. So for example, something like real-time prescription supply, what the dispense is going to be. At that point in time, you don't have like a script number. So I'm just wondering, is that in scope?
That's a good consideration. So one of the must supports, which popped in as well as status. So we can actually support if the item is in preparation, in progress, cancelled, on hold, completed, entered in error, stopped, or unknown. So we do have the opportunity to pop that status onto the script. At that point in time, it may not have an identifier. So you wouldn't pop an identifier or a script identifier on because it wouldn't be known. So that would definitely be in scope.
Okay, thank you.
That's all good. And Brett, sorry, I seen you had your hand up before. Did you have a question as well?
I'll come
Or
back in
discussion,
the
I should say?
extemporaneous discussion later. That's fine.
Oh, awesome.
Cool.
So how does, I suppose, just from the discussion that we've had, should we make the must support if known for an identifier for the dispense so it can be referenced back? And then if it's not, if the item's not being prepared, or sorry, if the item's not being finalized and there's no ID, then it doesn't get populated through using those must support obligations?
Yeah, I
Would
think
we
that
need
makes it optional, right? Just make it optional with a must support. Makes
Yeah.
sense, I think. And that because in some cases you wouldn't have one. You expect that. Yeah. Makes sense.
Awesome. All right. So Anthony, moving on to your point, so the next support and the must support element of status, that would be where we would fill out that use case of if the item has or hasn't been finalized. So that is a standard field that is in US core. US core, we would make this a must support element in the AU core medication dispense. You happy if I keep moving on, or did
It's
you want
already mandatory too, isn't it? The cardinality in the fire spec is 1-to-1, so you have to have it. So we really have to put must support on it.
Fabulous.
Choice.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so the next one is the status reason. We don't have it, and I believe there was a discussion point on this one, but I might have to come back to it. I'll have a double check. I did have my additional notes as well on these items. And one here.
Can I just make a point that AU base type column for status reason is probably a little bit misleading, because AU base doesn't have anything in its profile for status reason. It's all inherited from the base spec.
Yeah.
So that detected issue, for example, we don't have a profile for that.
Yeah. I'm happy for you to make that point. The status reason that I've got here is, hang on. I can't remember why we flagged that one. I'm going to come back to status reason if that's okay and move on to medication, which I think is where we need to have that, I suppose, a more in-depth discussion. So with our medications themselves, so obviously there's a must support on a medication. You can't have a dispense without an item. And under the medication and under codable concept, we have got the opportunity to provide a PBS code and an AMT code. Here. Jumping in, we've got two considerations between PBS and AMT before we move to the uncoded concepts. So the first consideration under our PBS, which is a must support, would be the consideration for an additional either extension or resource to include manufacturer codes so that you can verify the brand that was dispensed for items where the brand is absolutely paramount that you need to record. And then the second, I suppose, actually, we'll stick with that one there. Does anyone have any other considerations regarding PBS? I will happily hit silence for that one. Sounds good. Does anyone disagree with what I've said over providing the manufacturer code or including it as part of the medication dispense record if you are providing a PBS code?
I think currently we provide it in the medication resource, but yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to being in the medication dispense.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. I think it is, as you said, you'd be part of the medication resource, but including this as part of the dispense record as well. So making sure that that is a part of it.
I think though you'll have one or the other. So you'll have a code or a medication there. So I think we might think about saying if you have a medication, you must support PBS as well and AMT, right? We should probably think about that if you're going to use medication as the representation of the medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I will pop that one down. I'll tweak this as well as we go along, making a note of those items there. With AMT, we also had an additional consideration because you are able to provide more than one AMT code, having a must support on specifying which AMT concept is provided. Does anyone agree or disagree with that there as well?
I might just comment why that's important. Sometimes, yeah, things are recorded at like in AMT, you have the generic and the and brand specific terms, right? So you can actually record both, and you systems that are, let's say, terminology challenged or don't have terminology services that can determine the difference. Sometimes people will say have a slot for both of those concepts in their database, but they don't know which one's which because they both just say SNOMED. So that lets you tell the difference. So you can put the right thing in the right column, basically.
Yes. Thanks, Brett.
Cool.
So on that note, I will say that we are happy with that consideration as well. I'm just going to move forward then in our must support elements. So under here, we have got our medication reference, which I have put through as a must support, and it's not a must support inside of US core. So our medication reference itself essentially is just referencing that medication. It can either be plain text or, again, with that AMT or PBS information. So it's just it was a slice that was in the A base resource, and we seen it as mandatory. Anyone would like to disagree?
It's just clarifying though, you're not changing the cardinality, so it's
No.
optional but populated for no one. So
Yeah.
not actually mandatory.
Not actually
Mandatory if you have it, but not if you don't.
Yeah.
Just to be clear as mud.
The I know the other one that is just to align with the US core. So onto our subject, which is our patient reference. We would like to change the cardinality to a 1-to-1. So that it is mandatory to have a patient as part of the dispensing record, as you should always have a patient. Can anyone see an instance where that wouldn't be the case if we were to change the cardinality? I suppose just as a further clarification, where we got onto this would be when we were having a discussion regarding the scope of the item or scope of the actual medication dispense profile, is that a patient is really required for that dispensing process. If you're providing a medication again to a prescriber or to a facility, then that would be more of a purchase order situation. So that would be then taking away an out of scope for medication dispense. Just so everyone, I suppose, knows where we got to with that one. And again, it was a mandatory field for US core, so we thought that we would align with that too.
Yeah, and this fits with the scope of AE core being patient centric. So having that there. I think there was a comment in the chat too from Michael Osborne about medication display as well.
Okay,
Yeah, it was just that if you don't have the detail of the medication, you might want to put, free text or something.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that one, or is that going codable concept?
I think we've included that during codable concept that you have to have a medication, so that would be the medication display. And then the AMT information is only, or PBS information is only populated if known, but at minimum it would be a text field, which would then be covered with Philip's example from before over having non-codable items that get dispensed through a hospital. I've gotten the right end of the stick with that. But that would be where I'd see the medication display come through, Michael.
Yeah, that's fine. I thought it might just be the base reference one.
Alrighty. Yeah. I'll quickly move on to our other elements. I don't have many more slides after this, as this is quite a succinct profile. So moving on to our performer. So having that as a must support, who is actually performing the action. And again, you need to have a performer. Yeah, you need to have a person who is completing this dispensing record. Is everyone happy with having that as a must support? Underneath our performer or who is completing the action, we do have our function and actor as well. So the reference being the practitioner, the practitioner role, organization, patient, device, or related person. This was a mandatory field in US core. So again, just to align with US core, we thought that this would be there was no harm in popping it into the AE core. Into the AE core profile. Everyone happy with that?
I think, Charlotte, there's probably a general statement we can make too that all of these references would be updated to AE core references when we put them in, rather than the generic ones like patient, AE core patient, and AE core practitioner, and all those ones. So.
Actor being mandatory, yeah, like it's sort of a bit of a no-brainer for must support.
Yeah. Thanks, David. There is. So the next field I want to discuss was the authorizing prescription. So as part of the authorizing prescription, I have put this as a must support for now, noting that it can be optional. One of the considerations I wanted to have for the authorizing prescription is that, especially in like community pharmacy, where you may not have an authorizing prescription in the event of an owing prescription, a phone order, or for like Queensland a Schedule 3 supply, where the dispenser will just dispense the item for a Schedule 3 item. There actually may not be an authorizing prescription available, so making sure that this is an optional field and that we're not expected to have an authorizing prescription. Did anyone have any other considerations for authorizing prescription, or are you happy with what I've covered there, just to make sure that we are getting those scenarios that are captured in AE core? With that silence, I will take it that I've covered the scenarios. If everyone's happy for it to still be an optional must support, that is good. So just as a point of difference here, the US core has put the type as a codable concept as a must support, and I've taken this out. Or I would recommend that we don't have this filled in. So this is the pharmacy supply type example. So indicating the dispensing was performed on a trial, completion, partial fill, emergency fill, samples, etc. And the reason why I haven't popped this as a must support is that this is not a commonly filled out element within community pharmacy. This may be filled out in hospital. However, this isn't something that is detrimental to the dispense and can always be retrieved if you're using it as a base element. Does anyone have any questions on that there?
I think Stephen's got not on that item, but Stephen does have a comment on known orders.
I'm working off two screens, so I just want to make sure. I don't think I've got Stephen's here. They are followed up with written orders, Stephen, but if the prescription is finalised before the written order is provided, then the authorising prescription reference won't be in the dispensing record. So it's more that before they are finalised and they're reconciled, then it will be still I suppose, an orphan record with no authorising prescription.
But wouldn't a medication dispense record not be generated until it is being finalized? And when it is being finalized, then a written order would have already appeared.
Not always. So if the prescriber has done or completed a phone order to the dispensary, the pharmacist is able to dispense that item, record the item as being dispensed across to the patient, and then provide that medication out. So they will have, I suppose, in the workflow, what we call it as an owing supply. And then this dispense record will be flagged to say that it's still waiting for that authorizing prescription. So it's a separate, it is a supply and it is a valid supply to the patient. So it needs to be recorded and I suppose provided as a transmission if anyone's trying to view it or for patient summary purposes.
So we are rolling the two concepts of supply and dispense together under the concept of medication dispense.
It would still be, it's still a dispense.
Right.
It's still a recording of the patient being authorized to have that medication.
Okay, I assume that when the medication is already being given out to the patient, then it qualify to be a dispense record. Then,
Yeah.
okay. I'm also thinking about in the inpatient scenario where when a phone order is being made, and then the dispense would always have a written prescription to follow. So, okay, we're talking about scenarios where a supply is being given, and so therefore a dispense record needs to be generated with a pending written prescription to follow. Okay, yeah.
Yes, just depending on your state and territory legislation, it depends on how long a lead time that you are required to have that written prescription to follow or electronic prescription to follow. But there is a section of it could be a few days before actually receiving that official medication order. And as well with some states, so Queensland in particular, there are particular medications you actually don't are required by law to record, but you don't need a prescription or an authorizing prescription to dispense it, such as your Panadol, Osteo, and Ventolin.
Okay.
Awesome. Brett?
Well, you just made my point. I don't think every dispense needs authorization, so that's a good reason to make it optional. As well, I think like we're working on AU Core here. I really think we're heading towards needing a proper medications workflow kind of group that can work through a lot of these scenarios and go, how does this all work, meeting all of the actual requirements of the workflow. But I think it's to note we're not necessarily trying to solve that problem today. So I think this is kind of just a shareable thing that has information that is good for summaries and good for secondary use and CDS and useful things like that, but not necessarily implementing all of the requirements of a dispensing legal dispense, and all the things that, or even claimable, PBS claimable, and the whole bunch of aspects you might consider down the track.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to note, Brett. For any items, as much as we're talking about PBS code as an identifiable concept, I've tried to remove any of your PBS claiming, any billing, of the actual item itself, which is why we're also just talking about it being a patient-related supply opposed to providing an item to a facility. So making sure that we have just those bare bones of concepts. And then I absolutely agree, Brett, we might need a medications working group to work through those workflows because there are a lot of them. And I imagine that there's more workflows than everyone knows. But absolutely. So is everyone happy then just keeping it as the old optional must support for that authorizing prescription? I think that's where we left it on a comfort factor, and that's why I popped it in as an optional must support. I'm happy to move on. If anyone's got any questions, then please let me know. So we've covered type as well. So type is, just sorry to recap, it is the US core must support, but it's not a concept within Australia that I believe that a lot of systems keep, and I don't believe it's actually required for as the bare bones crux of a dispensing item. So I've left it as left it out, but just wanted to pop the line in to show you that it was part of a US core. Sorry. For quantity, I think we can all agree that we need a quantity, how much was actually dispensed to the patient. So I've kept this as a must support element. So with the next two, the when prepared and when handed over is a really interesting suppose concept. So in AU core, I've proposed the medication dispense and the when prepared field to be a mandatory element because you would want to know when the time it is being dispensed. US core has popped it through as a when handed over. Now, the reason why I recommended the when prepared versus the when handed over is traditionally dispensing softwares, when the item is dispensed, that's I suppose part of the assumed time that that item has been picked up because softwares haven't inherently had access to the when handed over information. So being able to record at least the dispense time as a mandatory element, which is what all systems should be doing now, opposed to making that when handed over a mandatory element and making sure it is a one-to-one, because if you are recording that you have dispensed an item, you should have the date for that item. Has anyone got any thoughts or preferences over the must supports for those two together?
Charlotte, I can see the when prepared is obvious, but the when handed over, surely, I mean, this goes back to Brett's question about workflow. Surely that would be quite troublesome in a community pharmacy setting out the when handed over. So I just can't see that that could be must support.
Absolutely. That's why I popped it in there the way that I did, Andrew. As you've mentioned, it's a troublesome part of it, and for especially in community pharmacy, that handed over as part of a transaction and as part of a sale, or that billing period, not so much part of the dispense. So that's why I opted for the when prepared, opposed to the when handed over.
Agree.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, sorry, how things like methadone would fit into this scenario?
Methadone would have a when handed over date. So that would be recorded at the time of the item being handed over. So that's actually an interesting one because I hadn't gotten through to the methadone recording side of things. I'd come from a community pharmacy aspect. But you are 100% on the mark over when that would be recorded. Does that, though, the methadone dispensing, when you're talking about, are you talking about the physical dispensing of the prescription item, or are you talking about the administration of the methadone?
I'm probably talking more about the administration of the methadone, and I'll leave it to other people on the call who have a pharmacy background. So I'm just throwing it out there about how others would see the core working in that scenario. Sorry.
That's all good. So just from apologies to bring back to community pharmacy, but from a community pharmacy point of view, when looking at methadone, I would look at it from you've got two different mechanisms happening. You've got your dispensing item to record the supply or the providing of methadone to the patient, and then you've got your individual recording of that administration. I imagine it would be potentially covered under the medication administration profile. But I'm happy to be wrong on that as well. Right. Did you want to jump in as well?
Oh yeah, just that nothing stops you using the handed over time if you want to supply it, right? It's just that we're not, we're not kind of not we don't have an expectation that you can would need to populate it. So I guess I guess these are important things for certain pathways, and I guess if it's important enough to include in core that as a requirement, we should probably have it. But I think it's like, would it be okay to have a medication dispense record of methadone without that? And would that still be useful and safe to share is probably the question.
Yeah, I think the AU Core is use case agnostic. So the idea is we don't want to constrain it in a way that then constrains out use cases. And absolutely, like Brett said, you can still use it. We're not saying you can't use it. There is nothing in here saying you can't use it. We're just saying that the sort of use case agnostic minimum requirements for a medication dispense is the ones with the must supports. But for specific use cases, downstream IGs, and like you can absolutely add more constraints and say, well, in this use case, it's mandatory, right? And other scenarios.
Absolutely. I am on that note though as well. Oh, David, sorry, you guys go first.
Thanks. Sorry, I was just curious, is handed over always handed over to a medical professional, or are we handing it over to the patient? Does it matter?
Hand it over to a patient is what that field is indicating. So
Right. Because if they're going to administer a prescription drug to me, do I really ever get it? Like I get it in the end, I suppose, but
yeah. Well, that's also a scenario to consider, and why I suppose you're strengthening my argument about not having a must support on the when handed over, because you would provide that prescription potentially to a pharmacy or to the dispensary, and then that item might be directly sent back to a medical practice or to a hospital or whichever scenario we want to talk about. So ensuring that you've recorded the date and time of dispense, absolutely, and then we can provide that when handed over in those particular scenarios, and can be, I suppose, when people want to look into their own workflows, providing that item back from base. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I guess, and the other angle I was sort of thinking about too, does it matter how long the medication has been prepared for? Does it change in time so that you better use it within 10 minutes or something like that? After I've prepared the medication, right?
I think that would be covered in the workflow of the software if I could take that away from it at the moment. Because what we're saying with the when prepared is not obviously constricting on time of when you should be handing over or using that item, but saying that the item was prepared at that date and time, and then in separate workflows and functionality, then the when handed over can be recorded or flagged if it is past that time, especially like with your chemotherapy items.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte, just noting you've got about 5 minutes left. So if you
That's-
want to talk about some particular things in those last 5.
I was going to say this. I believe we're on the last slide with this item here. I'm happy to run through quickly the two left of must supports, and then I'm happy to organize a separate section for the searching parameters and some of those value set bindings. Just as a final note, if we wanted to clear off, is everyone happy with the when prepared over the when handed over as the must support element for AU Core? Silence sounds good. Can I take that as the answer that I think we've drawn up?
Lots of thumbs up.
Just quickly, just to finish this part off, I've got in here as two final must support elements. So note being an annotation. So is there any annotations on the script? Again, an optional must support element, because if there is no annotations, don't have them. But if you do have them, we do definitely want them. And then just to note here, dosing instruction itself. So we've got the AU-based dosing instruction, and that's just plain text. In ours, we don't actually have a breakdown of text, timing, route, dose, and rate and dose. That's all presented in the US core. So it is only on the slide as a representation, only just to show you what they have got. But as for complexity of instructions, that can happen, and varying systems do varying things. Having that text to say the patient will take 1 tablet daily is the only must support element that I believe we should have in there. Does anyone have any disagreements with either of those two fields? Any thoughts on either of those two fields? To me, those two are straightforward. That's why I've just coupled them together for the last 2 minutes of our time. Awesome.
You did say they were text fields?
Yes, text
Free
fields.
text fields.
Free text, yes.
So just thinking of data analytics, trying to interpret that, free text is always a pain. So there's no way of structuring it, or I look somewhere else.
At this point in time, I think for the consideration that I don't believe many systems have it structured, just for the purpose of obviously wanting to provide that free hand so the patient has got it written in the way that they like it. I would personally preference to leave it as free text for now. It could be something that could be explored down the route, but I don't.
Well, I'll give you it's funny because having another discussion about that too. They're using AI to pull apart the text and make metadata name value pairs so that they can identify what's in this free text field, and they're getting quite efficient at it. So
Cool.
It's another approach that we should always remember.
I suppose on that note, then, if we were to do as a free text to begin with and then work down, it could be a new must support element that we could add at a later track. Would that be a sufficient, I suppose, way of going about it, David? Awesome. On that note, we are out of time for the session. Michael, would we be able to organise another session just for the medication dispense profile?
Yep, we can do that. I think so. The AE core work group where I think you'd be bringing this for decisions, I think is the 11th of June. Because I think we've got to make up one the week after next, which we're going to talk about endpoint and document reference. I think we've got on our forward calendar, I think the 11th of June for this to come to the work group. So we could do potentially, we could do next Friday, but it's the day after the Spark event in Brisbane. I don't know if that works or not. Otherwise, the Friday after on the 5th of June. Do you have a preference, Charlotte, on
I don't have a preference for either days. I think I am good on both of those. I've definitely got a preference.
Friday after, Michael, will be handy if you don't mind.
The Friday after the 5th of June?
I think. 5th or 6th, whatever it is.
5th of June. Yeah, I think that was the one I was going to suggest. Is everyone happy with 5th of June if I put that in same time, same place? I'll update the invite. And then that gives you some time to format that for the next week to take to the meeting, and it'll be fresh in our mind. So it's probably a good date for it.
Fabulous.
So Michael, will these slides be shared as per usual? It'll be on the Confluence page, will it? Or
yeah, we could probably put them on, Charlotte, on your vendor page, and we can put some information. We'll put the recording up there as well. So yep.
Yeah, I can add to the vendor page. Awesome.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charlotte. That was really good. Thanks for taking us through it, and we'll do a part 2 in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Charlotte.
Thank you. I hope I could answer everyone's questions. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Cheers.